It was 2:43 a.m. when the phone rang, the kind of hour that only ever brings bad news. I remember the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock above the kitchen sink, and the way my heart knew before my mind could catch up that life would never be the same again. "This is Officer Caldwell with the Knoxville Police Department," the voice said, heavy and formal. "Are you the mother of Grace Brooks?" I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. "Yes, what happened?" "There's been an accident. I'm afraid your daughter was pronounced dead at the scene." For a few seconds, there was nothing. No sound, no breath, just the roar of silence. Grace, my only child, was gone. She'd been driving home from a late shift at the hospital when a drunk driver crossed the median. They said she died instantly, as if that word could make it hurt less. At the funeral, the world blurred. People hugged me, whispered that she was in a better place, but I couldn't hear them. All I saw was Ethan Blake, her husband, holding their 7-month-old baby, Ava. His face was hollow, his eyes rimmed with red. "She's gone, Caroline," he choked out, clutching my shoulder. "I don't know what to do." "You hold on," I told him. "For Ava. She needs you." For a few weeks, it seemed like he tried. I brought meals, cleaned the house, stayed with the baby when he went to therapy sessions, but grief can twist people in strange ways. Ethan began to drink first a little, then a lot. The bottles started piling up. "You think you can replace her," he snapped one night when I offered to babysit. "You think you can just take over her life." I wanted to argue, but one look at him, wild eyes, trembling hands told me it wouldn't help, so I left quietly, whispering a prayer that he'd find his way back. 3 weeks later, I drove over for my regular visit. The door was open. The lights were off. "Ethan?" I called. No answer. The smell of stale beer hit me before I saw the mess. Empty bottles, clothes on the floor, a baby blanket on the counter. Then I heard the thin, broken cry of an infant. I ran to the nursery. Little Ava lay in her crib, soaked diaper, red cheeks, trembling fists. I scooped her up, holding her close as her tiny body heaved against mine. On the kitchen counter was a note, scrawled in Ethan's messy handwriting. "She's your problem now. I can't do this anymore." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then something inside me hardened. I called the police, then Child Services. A social worker came within the hour. A woman named Helen Norris, her expression tired but kind. "Do you want to take custody of the child, Mrs. Brooks?" she asked gently. I looked down at Ava Grace's blue eyes staring up at me through tears and felt the weight of the world settle in my chest. "She's not a problem," I said, voice steady now. "She's my granddaughter." Helen nodded, started the paperwork. I held Ava through the entire night, whispering lullabies Grace used to sing. And as the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, I promised her something out loud. "No one will ever abandon you again." What I didn't know then was that the man who'd vanished into the night would return years later, richer, sharper, and ready to take her away. The first few years with Ava were both exhausting and miraculous. I was 54, with creaky knees and thinning patience, but when that little girl smiled, it was like God had handed me back the Sunday. I became a mother again, overnight formula, diaper changes, fevers, lullabies. Friends from church would drop by and say, "Caroline, you're too old for this," but they didn't see the way Ava's tiny fingers wrapped around mine, or how she'd giggle when I sang off-key. She was my reason to wake up in the morning. The legal process took 6 long weeks. The state called it temporary custody, but Ethan never reappeared to contest it. Not a single call, not a penny of support. By the time the papers were finalized, Ava was mine in every way that mattered. We moved to a smaller house on the edge of Knoxville, a quiet place with a garden and a view of the Smoky Mountains. I went back to work part-time as a pharmacy technician at the local clinic. It wasn't much, but it kept the lights on and the shelves full. Ava grew fast. By age 4, she was reading street signs. By 6, she was composing little melodies on a second-hand piano I bought from a neighbor. One day, I found her sitting there, humming softly as her fingers pressed random keys that somehow made perfect harmony. "How did you do that, sweetheart?" I asked. She shrugged. "I can feel the sounds." Her teacher at elementary school, Mrs. Lawson, called me in for a meeting. She had a folder of test papers in her hand and a stunned look on her face. "I've been teaching for 30 years, she said. "I've never seen a child like Ava. Her comprehension, her pattern recognition, it's off the charts. Have you ever thought about having her evaluated for gifted programs?" I smiled nervously. "We're not rich, Mrs. Lawson." "It's not about money," she insisted. "It's about potential." We went through the testing, and the results were staggering, an IQ that placed her among the top 1%. I tried not to make a big deal of it, but word spread quickly. Soon, parents at school whispered when they saw us, and reporters wanted the grandmother raising a genius. I turned them all down. I didn't want her turned into a story. At home, I taught Ava that kindness mattered more than brilliance. She learned how to bake, how to plant tomatoes, how to say thank you. At night, we'd sit by the window, and she'd ask, "Do you think Mommy can see us?" "I think she can," I said. "I think she's proud of you." But there were nights when I'd sit alone at the kitchen table after Ava fell asleep, looking at her baby photos and wondering about Ethan. Was he alive? Did he ever think about her? Once, I dreamed he showed up at the door, reeking of whiskey, demanding his child back. I woke drenched in sweat, clutching the baby monitor. As the years passed, I told myself the past was buried, that he'd never return. But deep down, I knew life had a cruel way of repeating itself. And the more extraordinary Ava became, the more I feared that one day, someone would come knocking again. By the time Ava turned 15, the world around her had already started to whisper her name. Teachers called her a phenomenon. Scientists called her a prodigy. To me, she was still the little girl who used to press her ear against my chest and say she could hear the rhythm of my heart. That rhythm became her gift. It started as a school project, something simple, something she said was for fun. Ava had a classmate named Noah, a quiet boy who'd lost most of his hearing after a childhood infection. He loved music, but could only feel vibrations by placing his palms on a speaker. One afternoon, Ava came home, eyes bright, hair tangled, notebook bursting with sketches. "Grandma," she said breathlessly, "what if I could build something that lets kids like Noah see sound?" At first, I thought she meant a science fair toy. But within months, she had designed a prototype, a small wristband that translated sound frequencies into color patterns and gentle vibrations. When Noah tried it, he started laughing so hard he cried. "It's like the music is inside me," he signed. I cried, too. We submitted her project to a regional innovation fair in Nashville. Ava won first place, then state, then national. Suddenly, people were calling from all over the country. Articles popped up with headlines like, "Teen from Tennessee invents device to help deaf children feel music." I kept the world at arm's length. But Ava was brave. She accepted interviews, confident and poised, never forgetting to mention that her late mother had been a nurse who loved music. I stood behind her during one live interview, proud but anxious. Then the reporter asked, "Where's your father in all this? Has he seen your invention?" The question hit like ice water. Ava froze. "He's not in the picture," she said softly. "It's just me and my grandmother." The interviewer smiled sympathetically and moved on. But the damage was done. The word abandoned slipped into every article that followed. 2 weeks later, a thick manila envelope arrived on our doorstep, postmarked from Memphis. I thought it was another scholarship offer, but when I opened it, my stomach turned to stone. Inside was a petition for custody, filed by Ethan Blake. For a long time, I just stared at his signature, unable to breathe. 15 years of silence, 15 years of birthdays, first days of school, and late-night fevers ignored. And now, the man who left his baby crying in a crib had decided to return, perfectly timed to the moment the world had discovered her genius. I sank into a chair, clutching the papers as the words blurred through tears. Ava walked in minutes later, holding an apple from the kitchen. "What's wrong, Grandma?" I couldn't answer. I just handed her the envelope. Her face drained of color as she read. He wants custody? I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. He's coming back. Ava set the paper down slowly. After all this time? Her hands were trembling, but her eyes were steady. Then he's going to learn what leaving really costs. I didn't know it yet, but she meant every word. The next morning, I sat in a sterile office in downtown Knoxville. The smell of coffee and legal paper thick in the air. Across from me sat Marion Reed, one of the most respected family law attorneys in Tennessee, a sharp-eyed woman with silver hair pulled into a perfect twist. She read the petition in silence, lips pressed tight. When she finally looked up, her voice was calm but firm. Mrs. Brooks, I won't sugarcoat this. This is going to be difficult. Difficult? I whispered. He abandoned her. Marion nodded. Yes, but he's the biological father, and that gives him powerful standing in court, especially now that he's claiming rehabilitation. She pulled out a second page from the file. Ethan Blake is now CEO of a medical technology startup in Memphis. Married, stable income, no criminal record. He'll argue he left Ava in your care during emotional crisis and returned once he could provide for her properly. The words rehabilitated father made my stomach twist. He didn't leave her with me, I said, trembling. He left her to starve. Marion's expression softened. I believe you, but the court cares about evidence. Do you have documentation of his absence? Police reports, medical bills, proof he provided no support? I opened my worn leather folder, 15 years of receipts, vaccination records, and school forms signed only by me. Every milestone he missed, I said quietly. Every time she was sick, every parent meeting, every award. Marion flipped through the papers and nodded. This helps, but we'll need witnesses, teachers, neighbors, your pastor, and Mrs. Brooks. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. You should know he's already hired an aggressive legal team. They'll claim you alienated Ava from her father, that you never told her he tried to reach out. He didn't, I snapped. He never. I know, she said gently, but they'll make the court doubt that. By the time I drove home, my hands were shaking. The house felt smaller, heavier. Ava sat at the kitchen table, staring at her laptop. When she saw my face, she closed it. It's bad, isn't it? He's serious, I said. He's filed for full custody. Ava leaned back, crossing her arms. Let me guess, he's rich now. I didn't answer, but she saw it in my eyes. So, he disappears for 15 years, then comes back the second I invent something worth money, she said flatly. Real father of the year. I sat beside her. Sweetheart, we'll fight this, but it's not going to be easy. He can afford lawyers who charge more in an hour than I make in a week. Ava's voice softened. Grandma, maybe I should meet him. I froze. Why would you want to do that? Her gaze drifted toward the family photo of Grace on the wall. Because I want to know why he left, and I want him to see what he gave up. Her tone was calm, but her eyes carried something deeper, a fierce determination that both scared and amazed me. I reached for her hand. Then promise me one thing, I said quietly. Whatever happens, you remember who stood by you every single day. I know who my family is, she whispered. But as I held her hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man who once vanished into the night had returned not out of love but strategy. And we were about to enter a fight where love alone might not be enough. The Shelby County Courthouse stood like a monument to everything cold and unfeeling about justice. High ceilings, marble floors, and the faint echo of other people's heartbreaks. I held Ava's hand as we walked through the doors that morning. She wore a navy dress, her hair pulled into a low braid. Too young for this, I thought. Much too young. Marion met us in the hallway, her heels clicking sharply on the tile. Remember, she said, her voice low. Stay calm. Let me handle the arguments. Truth will speak for itself. When we entered the courtroom, Ethan Blake was already there. 15 years had carved confidence into him. His hair was shorter, his suit perfectly tailored, his wedding ring gleaming like a badge of redemption. Sitting behind him was a woman I recognized from the news articles about his company, Madeline, his new wife, all polished grace and corporate calm. When Ethan turned and saw Ava, his practiced smile faltered. For a brief second, I saw something real: shock, maybe even guilt, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. He stood, hands folded, playing the role of the repentant father. "Mr. Blake," the judge began, "you're requesting full custody of your biological daughter, Ava Brooks, age 15. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Ethan said smoothly. "I made grave mistakes after my wife's death. I was grieving and unstable. I believed leaving Ava with her grandmother was best at the time. I've spent years in therapy, built a stable home, and I'm ready to be the father she deserves." His lawyer, a tall man named Derek Vaughn, followed with a perfectly rehearsed speech. He called Ethan a man who rose from tragedy, emphasizing his success, his sobriety, his ability to provide Ava with opportunities far beyond her grandmother's means. When it was Marion's turn, she stood without notes. "Your Honor," she said evenly, "Mr. Blake calls this a temporary placement. We call it what it was: abandonment. 15 years without a single phone call, letter, or child support payment. He didn't leave his child with her grandmother. He left her alone in a crib." She handed the judge a photo of Ava as a baby, clutching a stuffed rabbit, the same one still sitting on her bed today. "This is the child he walked away from. This is the woman who raised her. Every scraped knee, every fever, every award, she was there. He was not." The courtroom fell silent except for the faint shuffle of papers. Then the judge turned to Ava. "Miss Brooks, I understand this must be difficult. Would you be willing to meet your father under court supervision while we assess this case?" Ava hesitated, her gaze steady on Ethan. "If that's what it takes for the truth to come out, yes." The judge nodded. "One supervised meeting a week for the next 30 days. We'll reconvene after that." When the gavel struck, I felt my heart pound in my throat. As we stood to leave, Ethan approached slowly. "Caroline," he said softly, "you look well." I met his eyes for the first time in 15 years. "And you look practiced." He forced a polite laugh. "I just want a chance to know her." "You had that chance," I said quietly. "You left it crying in a crib." He didn't respond, but when I looked back one last time, I caught the faintest trace of a smirk on his lips, cold, calculating. That night, as Ava sat at her desk filling out scholarship forms, she said without looking up, "He's different, Grandma. Polite, but I don't trust him." "Good," I said. "Neither do I." But deep down, I already knew. Ethan Blake hadn't come back for his daughter's love. He'd come back for something far more valuable. The first supervised visit took place the following Saturday afternoon at a family center in downtown Knoxville. The room looked harmless enough, painted in cheerful colors, with plastic chairs and toys in the corner, but to me, it felt like a trap. I wasn't allowed inside, only to watch from the glass partition. Ethan arrived right on time, wearing casual jeans and a friendly smile, carrying a bouquet of daisies. He handed them to Ava like a doting father in a commercial. She smiled politely, uncertain at first, but as he began to talk about her achievements, her invention, her brilliance, I could see her walls start to lower. He knew exactly what to say. After the visit, Ava was quiet on the car ride home. She held the bouquet on her lap, twisting the stems between her fingers. "He's different than I expected," she said finally. "He knows about my invention. He said he's proud of me." "Of course he's proud now," I muttered, "now that the world is watching." Over the next few weeks, the visits lengthened. 2 hours turned into 4, then full Saturdays. Ethan began bringing small gifts, books about innovation, tickets to conferences, and even a sleek laptop. When I protested, he smiled smoothly. "It's not a bribe, Caroline. It's what any father would do for his daughter." But I saw what he was doing. He wasn't giving her gifts. He was giving her belonging, a promise of a bigger world she could step into, one I could never afford to offer. Then one night, I overheard Ava on the phone in her room. Her voice was low, excited. "That's amazing, Dad. You really think I could lead a youth innovation division someday?" I froze. "Dad." The word hit like a punch to the chest. Later, after she fell asleep, I picked up her tablet to check her school calendar and accidentally opened her messages. I didn't want to snoop, but something deep inside told me to look. There they were. Hundreds of texts from Ethan. At first, they were sweet and harmless fatherly encouragement. But then I saw the one that made my blood run cold. "Once the court grants full custody, our investors will be thrilled to see the family united behind the project." Investors? Family united? My hands shook as I scrolled. There were more discussions about her device's licensing, potential buyers, and mentions of strategic branding. Ava had no idea what she'd walked into. That night, I barely slept. I spent hours digging through public records and corporate articles, tracing Ethan's new company. What I found made my heart drop. He wasn't just working in the medical field. He was the vice president of operations at the same technology foundation that had funded Ava's invention. His signature was on the approval letter dated 2 months before he filed for custody. He'd known from the very beginning. He'd helped her project succeed just enough to make her valuable, and then moved in to claim her like she was an asset, not a child. At sunrise, I called Marion, my lawyer. "Marion," I whispered, voice trembling. "He was behind the funding. He works for the organization that owns part of her patent." Silence on the line. Then Marion said slowly, "Caroline, if that's true, this isn't a custody case anymore. It's exploitation. Possibly fraud." I looked out the window at Ava, still sleeping, the early light on her face. "He's not fighting for his daughter," I said. "He's fighting for control of her invention." And for the first time, I realized this wasn't about love or redemption. It was business. Ruthless, calculated business. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and fear that morning. I could feel my heart pounding as we walked through security me in my navy dress, Ava clutching her folder of documents, and Marion Reed, composed as always, with that steel glint in her eyes. Ethan was already there, seated beside his lawyer, Derek Vaughn. His wife, Madeline, sat in the gallery, dressed in white, face calm but distant. He looked immaculate again, rehearsed, confident, like a man who believed he'd already won. The judge entered, her robe sweeping as she took her seat. "We're reconvening the case of Blake versus Brooks," she said. "Today we'll hear closing arguments and new evidence submitted by the petitioner's counsel." Derek stood first, his tone slick and sympathetic. "Your Honor, my client admits his past mistakes, but the record shows rehabilitation, financial stability, and a genuine desire to reunite with his daughter. He can offer Ava opportunities her grandmother simply cannot." He motioned toward Ava with a gentle hand. "She's a prodigy, Your Honor, a young woman whose brilliance deserves the best resources. Mr. Blake can provide that future." Then Marion rose. Her voice was calm, measured. "Your Honor, what Mr. Vaughn fails to mention is the true motive behind this sudden paternal devotion." She walked to the evidence table, picking up a folder. New evidence shows that Mr. Blake holds an executive position at Metasync Innovations, the very foundation that funded Ava's invention. Not only that, but his name appears on the grant approval form dated before he filed for custody. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Ethan's jaw tightened. "This isn't a father reclaiming his child," Marion continued. "It's a man reclaiming an investment. He manipulated a minor's innovation for corporate profit, then leveraged his biological connection to seize control." She handed the documents to the judge, who examined them closely. "Are you saying Mr. Blake used his position to benefit from his daughter's work?" "Yes, Your Honor. We have email records showing internal discussions between Mr. Blake and potential investors referring to Ava as the key asset and her invention as a brand opportunity." Ethan's lawyer leapt to his feet. "Objection! Those are confidential business documents obtained illegally." "Overruled," the judge said sharply. "Continue, Miss Reed." Marion turned to Ethan, Would you care to explain, Mr. Blake? Ethan stood, voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. Your Honor, I didn't exploit anyone. I was proud of my daughter. I helped her gain exposure because she deserved it. I wanted to be in her life again, to guide her, not control her. Marion's tone sharpened. Guide her? Or profit from her? He hesitated. That's not fair. She stepped closer. Fair would have been staying when she was 7 months old and crying for food. Fair would have been paying a dime of support. But you didn't. You vanished until she became valuable. The courtroom fell silent except for the sound of my own heartbeat. Then the judge turned to Ava. Miss Brooks, I understand you're 15. The court values your voice. Would you like to say anything? Ava rose slowly. Her voice was steady, clear. Yes, Your Honor. I wanted to believe he changed, but everything I learned tells me he didn't come back for me. He came back for what I created. My grandmother raised me, taught me that love doesn't come with contracts or investors. That's where I belong with her. The judge nodded solemnly. Thank you, Ava. We'll recess for 1 week to finalize deliberation. Please use this time to reflect. As we left the courtroom, Ethan turned to me. You're poisoning her against me, he hissed. I met his eyes, my voice low. No, you did that yourself when you put a price tag on her heart. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing his words echo in my head. But deep down, I knew something he didn't. He'd underestimated the one thing no investor could ever buy: Ava's integrity. The morning of the final hearing dawned gray and cold, rain streaking across the courthouse windows like the world itself was holding its breath. I sat beside Ava, my hands trembling as she held mine steady. She wasn't a little girl anymore. Her face had that quiet, determined calm that reminded me of her mother, Grace. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The courtroom felt smaller that day, less like a battlefield, more like a reckoning. Miss Brooks, the judge began, have you reached a decision regarding where you wish to live? Ava stood. Her voice didn't waver. Yes, Your Honor. I want to stay with my grandmother. She's been my parent, my teacher, and my home. And I'd like to request that my father's parental rights be terminated. The words landed like thunder. Ethan sprang to his feet. Ava, sweetheart, don't do this. I just wanted to help you succeed. You're making a mistake. She turned toward him, tears glistening but her tone firm. You helped yourself, not me. You used my invention for your investors. You saw me as an opportunity, not a daughter. The judge rapped the gavel for silence. Mr. Blake, you'll have your chance to respond. But there was nothing left to say. The courtroom clerk passed the final document to the bench. The judge read for a long moment, then spoke with steady authority. After reviewing the evidence of Mr. Blake's involvement in MediSync Innovations, his conflict of interest, and 15 years of abandonment, the court rules in favor of the respondent, Mrs. Caroline Brooks. Full custody and guardianship are permanently granted. Mr. Blake's parental rights are hereby terminated. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ava let out a shuddering breath and fell into my arms. My tears came hot and unstoppable. Behind us, Ethan sat down heavily, his mask of confidence slipping for the first time. His lawyer whispered something, but Ethan just stared blankly ahead. Officers moved closer as the judge added, additionally, this court recommends an investigation into potential corporate misconduct. When we stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet pavement and new beginnings. Reporters waited, their microphones outstretched, but Ava ignored them all. She just looked up at the gray Tennessee sky and said softly, I think Mom would be proud. Months passed. The house felt peaceful again, quiet in the right ways. Ava's invention was now being ethically developed through a nonprofit research group that honored her name alone. She'd been accepted to Vanderbilt University's engineering program, full scholarship. Sometimes she'd sit on the porch in the evenings, sketching new ideas, her hair glinting gold in the sunset. One evening, she turned to me. Grandma, do you ever regret taking me in? I smiled. Never. You saved me as much as I saved you. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You know what's funny? He called me a key asset once. But you never called me anything but loved. That night, after she went inside, I sat watching the fireflies flicker in the humid Tennessee dusk. The past felt far away, softened by time, but one truth burned clear. People can vanish, fortunes can change, but love the kind that fights through every sleepless night and courtroom battle never disappears. I whispered to the quiet air, as if Grace might still be listening. He thought he left me a burden, but he left me my reason to live. Lesson. Family isn't built by wealth or DNA. It's built by those who stay when it's hardest, who protect without profit, who choose love even when life gives every reason not to. And in that small Tennessee home, love had finally won.